to Altar Making Workshop, session number 2. We're going to continue working on our altar. As you can see, my paint has completely dried. And now we're going to give color to anything we've added to our altar. And we're also going to add the layers. So today we're going to say yes to some of those layers that we're going to add. To give it 4 layers if possible. Today's goal is going to finish any painting that is needed for our layers and anything that we added. Also, we're going to be molding some sculptures out of clay if you have clay. So I'll do some butterflies to go in our altar. And I'll talk a little bit as the importance of them. And then, so go ahead and take a few minutes to make sure you have everything you need. And let's continue. A quick tutorial on color mixing. These are our primary colors, what we call them, and it's red, yellow, and blue. And if we mix a little bit of red and I grab a little bit of yellow, it gives us a color orange. And then yellow and blue, if we add a blue and red, we should get a purple hint. Now, all our boxes are gonna look different, but I know that for my box, what is missing right now is I wanna color this brown, okay? And I'm gonna actually add a little bit of yellow up here. So look at your box, what still needs to get painted, and let's get started with that. And then the other element that's missing for me is my tree. So I'm going to cover that, the tape that I taped down, and I'm going to just add a little bit of brown to the side here. And I'm actually gonna mix a little bit of that yellow. I like that mustard yellow and how it's coming through. So I always think of like what colors are mixing well together. And I'm going to cover this piece. So go ahead and start covering any piece on your shoebox that needs the paint. We want to focus on covering just the basic layer of paint. We might find ourselves needing to paint a little later, but for now, let's paint what we've added. Que tradicionalmente se encuentran, traditionally we find, in the altares made. Y son los 4 niveles de Mictlán. And in my case, my tree doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to make sure I covered that tape on the side. But if I want to start giving it some texture and not painting all the way through, that's an option. That's a choice for my painting here, okay? And I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make sure I allow it to be free a little bit, give it a little bit of room. And I almost foresee the need of an extra piece of tape there, so I'll add that a little later. Okay, so that should take you a good 10 minutes just to finalize whatever paint is needed for your altar. And I like to blend that yellow. All right, so a good 10 minutes should have gone by already. I want this tree to blend with my yellow. So I'm actually gonna get some of my yellow and just put strips on it. Create some lines. And I know it's my tree, but it's a magical tree, and it's my Dia de los Muertos tree, and it's for my abuelita. So I'm imagining it has this other element of magic to it. Once you finish looking at your altar and putting all the color that you desire for now, we're gonna let it dry. I have my basket of flowers that I created. Now I created a handful of them just so I have enough to show you. And also I might want to just add a bunch of flores, right? to not only my own altar here, but around my home. Traditionally, the cempasúchils are orange and yellow. I did add a purple because I felt like it would go with the overall color scheme that I have going on here for my altar. And I haven't glued them yet. I'm just kind of looking at where I would place them. I also made some pink ones. And I like this idea of kind of having it on the wings that I kept on my altar. In your case, it might be the lip of your shoebox. So what I mean by the lip of your shoebox is that your shoebox might look something more like this, more traditional. So you might want to add flores right here. Or maybe you created your shoebox like this and you want to add flores all down here, and then we'll concentrate the top here with other elements. So if you want to add, let's say, another layer, it could be at the bottom. We would add a cuadrito. I have one of these little plastics that I mentioned I got from like a muffin. So that would be already 1, 2, 3, and then I could add a fourth one up top, right? And that's another layer right there. It could be the sunrise coming up, or it could be la luna on the side. So this is where you could start seeing how else could I expand beyond the cajita? What else can I add to it? So if you just got motivated and got excited and you're like, yes, I want a luna behind my box, or a sol or a rainbow, this is a great time to do it. Best route to go would be to tape it down or to use the hot glue gun, right? In my case, we're gonna add a few layers, and I do like the idea of it having a little extra entrada, so to speak. So I'm gonna add that to the bottom. Okay, I'm gonna add this box to the bottom, and then I am going to commit to having something on top there. I do want a little extra box up there, okay? So we want to glue these things down. If you're deciding to add a box like me last minute just to give it a little bit more height, I'm going to cover this small box with a piece of tissue paper to give it some color, okay? So I'm going to do that. We're going to wrap any box or plastic that you decided you want to add with tissue paper. It doesn't have to be as neat as you may need to imagine. It's making sure it wraps all the way around and then pressing down on the edges. So once you know it managed to get all the way around with just one sheet, and if you need more than one sheet, you could add it with some tape. We're going to do that all the way around. We want to make sure all our base is covered. The base, and I'm going to put it in the long form because I want to make it an entrada. And what I mean by entrada, it's the pathway, okay? And usually in traditional altares, there's a long pathway indicating where their altar would be for antepasados. Now I know where it ends, so I'm going to make a little mark with a tape, and I'm going to put tape here and all the way around. Okay. So it's going to look something like this, and press it down. I've also decided that I do want to have that little box on top. So that little cajita that I mentioned, I am going to bring it up here, and I am going to use tissue paper to also wrap it. Go ahead and do that. And I really like working with similar colors, so I'm going to add this turquoise color to it. I'm going to estimate more or less the amount that's going to require of me to glue this down. To cover this little guy up, it's not going to take much. Again, fold it inward. I'm not sure. So I'm going to glue that down in a minute with my hot glue gun, but I'm also going to add another little cajita, and I might actually glue it on the opposite side. That way it kind of keeps it balanced. So as you're figuring out the different levels, think of what's going to give my box balance, my altar balance, okay? So if I have too many things on the left-hand side, it might look a little too heavy, so I might want to spread it out. So I'm going to do it right about there. All right. Let's see what happens if I add a little bit of yellow to this plastic. Okay, but it gives it a different look. Le da otro diferente color al agregarle poquito más color amarillo. You could always refer to a color wheel to look at complementary colors, colores que van juntos. But it's really thinking about who, why, and who are you doing this for? ¿Por quién estamos haciendo esto? ¿A quién estamos ofreciendo? ¿Cómo podemos mejor representarlos? How can we best represent them? So I'm going to add that to my altar. All right, so I'm going to start adding to my altar. Those layers are drawing or sketch, but maybe your sketch has evolved too as we started doing. Add my altar level to this side. I want to press it down and it's staying. It is not going anywhere. And this other creation that I made by adding a little bit of color, I'm going to add hot glue to the end of it and I'm going to glue it down too. So I'm going to add glue right here on the side. So start looking at the levels and glue it down. So it's going to be at an angle for me. See it right there. It's at an angle. So far, I've gave the rest of my altar the base. So I even colored the ceiling blue, okay? I gave some texture to my tree that's in the making. I've added 3 additional levels, okay? The bottom as an entrada. This little cajita that is gonna serve as another level. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And decorations that I wanna show you and go over. We are going to add a couple of flores. I am going to add, for now, at least 2 of these. Adding hot glue at the bottom, abajito de la flor. Same thing to the other one. And I'm using my purple and orange cempasúchil. So I added my 2 flowers right here. Wherever the glue was at, you want to press it down. And it shouldn't take too much glue to do that. I really like how that looks. And I actually want 1 more flor over here. And I have a pink one, so I'm going to add the rosita one right there. So the glue's right there, and I'm going to press it down. Con cuidado con las manitas, careful with your fingers as you're pressing down. Make sure you don't touch that glue directly because it is hot. All right, so for right now, this is what we have. Base color all the way around. Some flores in entrada if you decide to add a pathway. 4 levels to your altar, and anything that you've added has paint on it. All right, for the time being, we're going to set this part of our altar to the side, and now we're going to focus on creating a few more decorations that we find in an altar. All right, so just as a refresher, in our traditional altares, we will find marigolds. Now, la flor, el cempasúchil, represents la tierra, the element of earth in our altar. So we want to honor all 4 elements in our altar. This flower is to be said to symbolize the sun, el sol, and it has a strong scent. So it allows our antepasados, our loved ones that we're honoring in our altar to guide them. Another thing traditionally you'll find in our altar, make these smaller ones, is papel picado, okay? Papel picado represents the elements of wind. So as the papel moves, el aire, it moves back and forth. El papel picado reminds us of movimiento, motion, not just decorative, but it has a meaning behind it. We're gonna move on and we're gonna create some butterflies, some mariposas. So I have with me here of a paper plate, and with our paper plate, I'm gonna use a color to see if you could see it a little cleaner. We're gonna draw a mariposa, and all of us have a different idea of what a mariposa looks like. This is just the cutout. So once you've drawn your mariposa, once you have your mariposa, go ahead and cut it. Y las mariposas representan our transformations as human beings, from our human form to our spirit form. I'm just gonna start tracing, okay? So using my cutout, I'm gonna trace a second one, or wait to do it with clay. So we're just doing the silhouette. We're not even worrying about too much the detail, and I'll show you why in a moment. So there's two ways to cover this mariposa up. And I'm gonna cover my mariposa with some of that piece of tissue paper that I had left over. And just for fun, I'm gonna do it two different colors. Ran out of that one, so I'm gonna add a little bit here. So I know I need about that much to cover the entire mariposa. Excellent. Then I'm gonna add glue to the side. If you don't wanna get your fingers dirty, you could always use an old paintbrush, something that you don't use as much to paint, and use it to spread the glue. And we're gonna glue it down. And then you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna wanna add paper to the top. This is one way to put some color to our mariposas. I'm gonna put this aside for a moment while I show you the alternative way of doing it. To not paint on my desk here, I'm going to lay this mariposa on top of a paper plate. Now I have a sponge here. I'm gonna add some of this color from the palette that I showed you earlier. So it gives it like a bubbly texture here. And because we do want to color both sides, go ahead and flip it. It's okay. Your fingers are gonna get a little dirty. Just make sure you have that napkin ready. I'm gonna add a little bit of azul. And a little bit of that red is coming through, and I love it. I'm gonna put it on the side. Now, if I have somewhere where I could place it that it could stand up for a little bit, I'm gonna bring my water there just to let it dry on both sides. I'm gonna wash my hands. And this other mariposa that we did with paper, we wanna start cutting it, okay? So as you could see, it's gonna have a nice, beautiful color, and we're just gonna trim around it. We could see it, we could feel the hard stock of our index card or our paper plate underneath the layers of colores here, tissue paper. So as you could see, that you could see the beautiful colors that are coming through, and it should be a little moist because of the glue, and that's actually a perfect place we want to have it. So fold it down, and if you have a toothpick at home or anything pointy, ever so lightly press it and hug it again. So it should be in a palito, like that. And it's not gonna stay there. It can, but it doesn't have to. And then from our egg carton, I got a little pedacito, because it's nice and strong. I'm gonna press the toothpick inward, and I'm gonna let my mariposa dry like that. Okay. Right on this side, so it's gonna look like that. Again, this is from an egg carton, a palillo, and the tissue paper with a paper plate that we use. Okay, I'm gonna put that to the side, let it dry. I'm gonna do the same thing with this one, the one that I painted. Bend it down in the middle, add a palillito, and then allow it to dry. I'm gonna put this one on the sponge that I used earlier to dry. Okay, so the mariposas could be added to our altar prior to our next lesson. I'm gonna clear some of this water and paint because I don't need it anymore. All right, the next thing I would like to go over, mold magic clay. Again, this is optional. If you don't have one of these, that is okay. In this case, you could continue using toothpicks. I'm going to use a couple of alfileres for this piece, okay? So as you could see, I made a little dog here, and it's white still. But once your clay has hardened, like mine right here, this perrito's ready, I could add the esqueleto, right? So I'm actually gonna add a perrito to my altar. And you could, again, choose to do that or not, but I will go over that so you have an opportunity to see what I mean. This clay is verde, it's green, and I was okay with that. It came with a different packet because I want to make nopalitos. I'm using this little plastic container that I got from like the seaweed snacks just to help me create a base for my nopalitos. I won't be using it, but it's gonna help me as I'm creating it. If you don't have something similar like this, a cutting board or a plastic cutting board is going to work. I'm gonna create a little bit larger piece just so it sustains it, okay? So it's gonna look something like this. And again, we might be creating different things, but the idea behind it is the same. Carefully press it down. If your manitas are chiquitas, if you're a child, you might want to consider getting some help from an adult to help shape this, okay? So the beginning of my nopalito is gonna look like this, and it has a little bit of an open end to it because I wanted to hug the bottom of the surface. So that's the beginning. I'm gonna add a couple more pieces to my nopalito, couple of nopales, another penca, and this one is gonna be a little smaller than the last one. Stay dry. Excellent. So if we want to make little creations such as this guy right here, I'll show you a person out of clay. Again, I'm going to use this as a base only so it could kind of give me something to work from. I'm going to work with white magic mold. Kind of separate it in thirds, your clay, so you know what to use for the bottom, the mid portion of your body, and then the top, okay? So I'm gonna start with the legs, the bottom. And if you make a nice long strip, again, using that pin to help you. So those are the legs. And I still have some left over, so I wanna make sure that I have some support at the bottom and I'm crossing it. So that's just the legs portion of it, okay? So cuando estamos creando, when we're creating and molding, I like to use these little plastic squares to help me support what I'm creating. It takes about a day for it to completely dry. This is like a little seaweed packet, but any like macaroni and cheese little containers or yogurt containers are great because you're gonna throw them away anyways. So you might as well use it as you mold it. And I added a pin, a sewing pin underneath it to just help me be the esqueleto behind it, okay? And I made 3 little balls from that one magic mold clay, all right? So with this second ball, I'm gonna do the body. And I know I need like a torso of some sort. Again, depending what who you're building. Is it a female? Are they petite? And I'm gonna start indicating the arms. If you have enough to create the arms, awesome. You might need to borrow from the other one. And then I'm gonna bring that torso down. It's gonna look like this at this point. Again, si tienes suficiente, bring it down so that you make those arms. And we won't paint the esqueleto just yet because we need to let it dry. And then what are the hands doing? Okay. This hand, the right hand for me, is gonna be in the lap. This one might wanna say hi. If it wants to wave, we're gonna wanna add a pin there so that it stays that way. And when it starts drying, it dries in that form. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna add a secondary pin going from inside and support the hand. So when it dries, this little pin, we could take it out. But as you could see, the little manita is gonna be standing up. And the last thing I'm gonna do with this last piece of clay is I'm gonna add a cabeza, a head or hair if I would like to do that. Now for the head, it's an esqueleto head. Remember that, yeah? So I like to pinch a little bit in the back to kind of indicate the neck, but it also helps when you try to sit it on the rest of the body. Now, this is my little neck, and it's a calavera form. Remember, how does your person look like? What did they look like in the flesh? ¿Tenían más carnita? Did they have a little bit more meat? We want to make sure we represent them. I am going to add yet another pin. You don't have to. Your clay sometimes finds its own way of finding balance. I have found that it's easier for me to create with pins because then I get pretty exact of what I want. So now this is with the head. Okay, this is con la cabecita. Okay, you can see the esqueleto form right there. I've added yet another pin in the back to help support it. You don't need it, but it helps. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of hair. And the hair will be the last piece. My abuelita had long hair, so I'm going to try to do as much as I can with what I have left. Awesome. So that's mine right there. Okay. So this is my little mold of my abuelita here. It's going to look completely different once we add detail to it. The only thing that I recommend us doing before it continues to dry is with the back of your of a brush, you could press down on where the eyes are going to be. Everything else we could paint on. But where the ojitos are going to be, make sure you make some holes in there, okay? And that's it. That's going to be the last bit of today's session. We're going to let these dry. And by the time we come back, we make sure we give them some color, okay? Thank you so much for joining me for lesson number 2. Today we gave our altar so much color by finishing the details in our layers, adding those 4 layers, adding some flores. We could add more. As you can see, I made a handful more. Hopefully you did too. We'll add papel picado in our next session. Also, I'm going to add my branches to my tree. So think of what else is missing in my altar. We will add our little figure. If you did not make a little person because you don't have the clay, I highly encourage you until before we meet next time to sketch the person. You could do it using a paper plate, and that's a way that we could represent them, okay? So the molding of the clay is just a representation of this person that we're honoring in our altar. All right, and before we leave today, grab a piece of paper, and I want you to think of who are we creating this beautiful altar for? 3 things about them. The first 3 things that come to mind, write them down. And the last thing I want you to write down is the place you see them. So in your memory, when you think of them, where do you see them? Okay? And once you're done with writing those things down, put it aside, save your altar and all your beautiful crafts that you've started to create in a safe space, and you'll be ready for lesson number 3. All right? Muchísimas gracias, and we'll see you then. Bye.